Hey everybody, welcome back here to day 28 of Joyful January. We got 3 more days. 3 more days. 3 more days. We can do it. Let's finish this month strong together. There's more joy to be had. This month we've talked about some joy killers, right? We've actually covered a few this month. We talked about the joy killer of worry and of unforgiveness, and the joy killer of wearing masks in our life, and how that robs the joy out of our life. We're going to talk about one last joy killer today for the month, and that's the joy killer of comparison. Comparison robs the joy out of our life. It robs a lot of joy out of my life. And I tell you something, comparison is something we do. It's a natural thing that we do. And sometimes it's actually not bad. If you're driving along and you see all the cars in front of you start slowing down, you should probably slow down too, because there's probably something in the road, or there's probably a motorcycle cop hiding behind a tree. And it'd be wise to slow down with those other cars. In fact, they've done a study, you might have heard of it, it's a famous study, where they were trying to test people to see just how far they could push them in comparison before they cracked, basically. And so they would have a test subject, and they'd bring the test subject into a room, and they'd have a bunch of other people in the room, maybe 4 people, and they would ask everyone a question. And the first 4 people would give the wrong answer. Like blatantly the wrong answer. And the test subject knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's the wrong answer. And the study was to see what that test subject would do. Would they compare themselves to everybody else who's answered and answer the same way, even though they knew that it was false? Or would they say what they know is true and be the only one that did that? And guess what happened? A lot of times that test subject said what they knew was untrue because they didn't want to stick out, right? They had compared themselves to everybody else and they aligned themselves with it instead of answering the way that they knew was true. And so that's just true of our human behavior. But comparison is destructive. Comparison is distracting when it takes our eyes off of what God's doing in our life. When it causes us to not run the race that God's given us, that we're looking around and going, you know, that person's ahead of me in this race. I need to catch up. I'm not where I should be. Or that person has something in this race that I don't have. And so now I got to go get that thing. And I got to stress myself out to work and to go get that thing that maybe I'm really not meant to have. The truth is, we all have limits. It's part of our life. A river that doesn't have limits, that doesn't have banks, is dangerous. That's not good. In fact, the banks of that river help guide it to where it needs to go, and it's ultimately life-giving for that river. And for us, we might compare ourselves to other people, but we don't know what that person had to sacrifice to get to where they're at, what they had to give up to be where they are, what they had to do, and the things that they had to go through to get the thing that we are grasping after. And Paul gives us an amazing encouragement about this in Galatians 6. Check this out. Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else, for we are each responsible for our own conduct. I'll tell you, of all the joy killers that we've talked about this month, this one is the one that gets me. This one I can't seem to shake. I struggle with it. I compare myself to others way too much. And it's caused me to lose a lot of joy in my life. It's the thing that I don't want to do, and I'll be running along my race and I'll be content with what God's doing and excited about my life and what's in front of me. And then I'll see someone who's in a position that I want to be in, or that gets to do something that I want to do. And my mind will go into this mode of, what am I going to do to get there? And can I have that thing? And I just got to continually grasp myself out of that, pull myself out of that. Because it doesn't just knock me off for a moment. It's not something I can just shake out of usually. Sometimes it takes a couple days for me to kind of get out of this funk of comparing myself to to somebody else and running the race that God has put in front of me. And I'll just tell you kind of a lighthearted way that I struggle with this is I drive a 15-year-old Toyota Prius. And on one side, it's got a huge dent from where I dropped a box in the garage on top of it. The other side, I hit one of those parking stone blocks and scuffed up the whole side. The other side's been replaced because someone backed into me in a parking lot and we had to replace the whole side. The whole front's been replaced because I accidentally hit a coyote. And that's a whole nother story. The fuel cap doesn't open with the latch. It gets stuck. So what I have to do is when I'm getting out of the car, I have to wrap the seatbelt around the fuel cap latch in the car and then go and manually pry it open to be able to fill it up with gas. There's always lights on the dash, and I just have trouble getting them all fixed all the time. And then the battery just seems to die at the worst times. And I've replaced the battery. I don't know what's wrong with it. And so I got the jumper cables that I keep handy. And they come in handy quite a bit. And you know what? Most of the time, I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that. But you know when I struggle is when my friend pulls up in a blacked out F-150 with tires that are like size of me. Get inside, it's got the nice heated leather seats and like a cappuccino maker and everything you could ever want. And I just begin to go, I don't have this. And what would life be like? It would be so great if I had this. And I just got to snap myself back and go, it's not what I have. And I don't need it. It's not going to make my life any better if I take hold of this thing. And I remind myself of God's truth as much as I can. And again, I really struggle with this. But I'll tell you one thing that has helped is actually comparing myself today to my previous self. Comparing who I am today to who I've been in the past. And if we're talking about a race, if you've been on a race, you know it is helpful to compare yourself to where you've been. Right? If you're on mile 8 of a 10-mile race, it could seem like you have tons to go. But when you look back and go, man, I've come a long way. I'm so grateful that I've made it this far. It begins to fill you up with gratitude. It begins to fill you up with joy. So one of the ways I do this is through a little app on my phone. It's called Time Hop. Time Hop. And what the app does is it takes your pictures and your social media posts from this day in history. So today's January 28th, 2022. It'll take all the pictures from January 28, 2021 and January 28, 2020 and so on. And it'll show me those pictures. And I'll look back and where I was at a certain time and what life was like and just be grateful for how God's brought me. I'll look at pictures of my kids 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and they're tiny. And I forget every day that I see them that they're growing because I don't see it. I don't see the day-by-day growth as much. But when I look back and I see the year-by-year growth, it just boggles my mind. And I just go, I'm so grateful for how they're growing and they're healthy and they're developing. And the same is true as our life with God. When we look back and we see where God's brought us, how He's grown us, how He's developed us, how He's brought us along, the good things that He's done in our life. We're grateful that we're not where we used to be. And we're grateful that God's bringing us to where He wants us to go. And so we got to be grateful for today. And so you might try this. Compare yourself today against your previous self. Take a minute and just journal. Just say, where was I a year ago, 3 years ago? Where was I 5 years ago or 10 years ago? What was my life like? And what can I be grateful today for what God's done in my life? The faith steps that I've taken, the ways I've grown, the way I've sacrificed and worked through things, and how I look more like Jesus than I did 10 years ago. This would be a great exercise that could produce a lot of joy in you as we fight to defeat the thief of comparison. And I know I need this today. So I hope that it's helpful for you today and that joy is on the horizon for you. Have a great day, and we'll see you back tomorrow. See ya.